So here's where we're at. We're where the prophetic is meeting the reality and the headlines of the day. There is no way to put into context world events outside of, in my perspective, a biblical event. Now, there are people that jumping up and down at, the Burning Man Festival. And for the record, everybody, when the captains of industry and of, good night, Hollywood and everybody go to the Burning Man has always been Satan. It even goes back to the Druid worship of the Wicker Man. But beyond that, it goes even to the, I forget which one of the bands was, and I don't want anybody to go look it up, but, I am the God of Hellfire, or the lyrics were, and I bring you fire, and it was a rock tune, and I don't know who that is, I could care less, but why it's important now is given the choice between life and death, the Shadow Masters will present such a wonderful picture of death, meaning you are now God through transhumanism, through all of the genetic alterations, through artificial intelligence. Man will become God, and you can choose your own hell or your own heaven. Oldest lie in the book is now the greatest promise for the future.
Well, it's very humanist. It's a humanist point of view. It's not Christian.
Well, no, but even beyond humanist, Dave, it's a Satanist point of view, because that's what Satan said to Eve: "Ye shall not die. Ye shall not die." So we're at the point where now mankind is trying to escape eternal death. They believe that by perpetually downloading their subconscious into new and greater versions of the old them, they believe that converging and merging with robotics and ultimately giving way to a, if you will, virtual other world existence where they're avatars and nothing is kept from them. Even when God scrambled the languages at the Tower of Babel, he made the statement, let us go down and scramble their languages, because at that point they had purpose in their heart, and everything they had purpose they would do. The question is where will God scramble? And I coined a term, Dave. I call it technolon. Not Teflon, but technolon, Technylon, and that's just technological Babylon. Because as Babylon sought a universal language, universal religion, universal one world, that's where we're at now. Just as God scrambled it then on the plains of Shinar, now we see, if you will, a technological version of Babylon rising, and Mystery Babylon, which has been hid in the shadows of ancient history, is now prominently featured in the headlines of contemporary history. So the thing is that we're seeing a full-scale press for global domination by the Luciferians, and that's the only reason why in 1950 Warburg could make that statement. And 1950, we're talking 68 years ago, and he said, by consent or by conquest there will be a new world order. And George Bush's points of light, those are Luciferian light. And by the way, it'll be interesting to see if Barbara Bush passes away. They're already running headlines of her death, and she's gone home for hospice care. I think she's, 92 years old. But it'll be interesting to see the timing of their mutual passing. Now, I'm not wishing that on any of them. They will reap what they've sown. Just like David Rockefeller and all of his statements about a one-world government, I guess he's realizing now that it may have been a big mistake for him to buy into the lie. And it's the same thing for Madame Rothschild and those who go into eternity without Jesus Christ. So here's the thing. They're getting ready to pull the plug on all nation sovereignty, and the best way to do it is with World War III, and the man of peace comes on the scene. The question is, will India and Pakistan go at it during that time period? How close is Israel ready to launch on Iran, or Iran ready to launch on Israel? As they said, Tel Aviv and Haifa will basically be vaporized. How soon will Russia launch on Turkey, even though they seem to be allies? The Bosphorus, obviously, where the Russian ships are passing through even today, on their way to the port of Tartus, the control of the Bosphorus will absolutely give Russia total control on their western shores of the Black Sea and everything else. So if they control that, they control everything. So I said years ago, Dave, and I think this is an accurate statement, we're going to watch double crosses, triple crosses, and quadruple crosses between nations, between presidents, between kings. And isn't it fascinating that the UN, the most, I can't say it like I'd like to, but the filth-laden vermin that they are given the determining factor of what is peaceful and what is not, and how they should have the last word. And I believe that right now you are seeing in this country a president who has been co-opted by the power brokers beyond most people's recognition of their names. And it goes beyond the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and the typical, people that want to go rehash 25-year-old information that are just finally getting it. They got to be, if you will, they've got to come into the context of today at light speed.
Well, you're absolutely right. In fact, I want to mention something about double crosses. You brought that up, and I've made this point in a broadcast. I said, of the nations who attacked Syria, it's interesting that Germany wasn't one of them. And I wrote an article that very week before, and I said I looked for Germany to one day leave NATO because Russia holds natural oil over their head, and Germany has much more in common with Russia economically than they do with the United States.
Well, also, look who Angela Merkel is. Whether, it's true that she's a relative of Hitler, it is true that she had Stasi connections. There are even, stories about her being the head of the Stasi, East German secret police, until they merged. And the point that I think people have got to understand this, I know a guy, and this is a true story firsthand, that was in Rome. He sat with a man who was an Italian billionaire, and the guy showed him a picture, and on his phone was a picture of Angela Merkel with the head of the KGB. And that was years ago. But for the record, I believe that Germany is already preempted. Now, here's the thing that's interesting. There's a lot of argument over the history of Albert Pike's World War III and Mazzini's letter. But whether it was really written, Albert Pike's Three World Wars, somebody's following that blueprint to a T. And Pike, in Morals and Dogma, made the statement, the God they worship is Lucifer. So the defense comes in, and they try and claim, well, Lucifer isn't Satan. Lucifer's the light bringer. But the point is, Lucifer was his name before the fall, and after the fall and the rebellion of he and a third of his angels, his name became Satan, the adversary. So what is becoming more and more evident that we're now watching, if you will, ancient kingdoms springing back to life, and the war that was never truly won and victory now emerges 2,000, 3,000 years later. And we're all in this thing, and it's going to get problematic. You were talking about food. The drought index for the western United States is just absolutely horrid. The late winter that just is hitting the Midwest into the Michigan, into the, all the states along the Great Lakes and down going into the East Coast. If you look at all the volcanoes going off, I'm not trying to, go ADD on you, but I'm just trying to say, volcanic gas in the upper atmosphere has a cooling effect. With weather war geoengineering patented devices, they can control the jet stream. So in essence, you can provide a freeze where someplace should be hot, and you can bring heat to where someplace should be cold. All this is going to affect the availability of water and food. And Dave, I think I've said this on your show before, my very first radio program on KHNC, not KHNC in Johnstown, Colorado, is I think the very first thing I said, and this is something I believe the Lord showed me, he said, Steve, the day will come. And people say, well, I don't believe God talks to you. Well, then check it out in the headlines. The day will come when fresh potable water and food, edible food, will be more precious than silver and gold. Does that mean you don't need silver and gold? No, because when you've got silver and gold, the Swiss have a wonderful statement. Look at how long they've lived without war. He who has gold never starves. Someone said, you can't eat gold. I said, I said, that statement is historically untrue. You look at it that you just have to take a bite of gold and somehow it's the same as a T-bone steak. But for the record, every nation, whether it was Pol Pot's Cambodia, whether it was Vietnam, whether it was the Eastern Bloc nations falling after World War II to Soviet communism, whether it was China even, the people that made it out to Formosa, all the people that had something to barter or trade made it out alive. And, fascinating. I told the story. I think this is really important because we get a lot of skeptics. You guys are all just trying to sell fear to sell gold. Not you, me. Or you're trying to sell fear to sell food. Oh, yeah? How would you like to be in the panic? How long do you think, ladies and gentlemen, it will take for the food shelves to go bare? Dave, I've heard people say 3 days, 3 hours. Well, I have a surprise for them. All food sources, all food depositories have already been cataloged by FEMA. The very first thing under a state of a national emergency that will be basically shut off and shut down to people are airports, gas stations and grocery stores, food warehouses, restaurants, everything, hospital, commissaries, you name it. Any place food is fed to groups and that is stored, for instance, meat lockers, all those places have already been known. So somebody says, well, I'll have 3 days. You better be on the, how should I say that, the receiving end of prayerful consideration what we're talking about tonight, Dave, because, again, it's not just that it's availability. Food is always available. It's the price you have to pay, or in some cases, the price that people had to pay. There's a book on Stalingrad that Bob Griswold gave me, and I read it, and the horrific things that people did, women and kids having to sell themselves to eat. I literally weep when I read that.